Morning, everybody. Welcome in. This is the morning meeting on a big day for two-way. We'll spend some time with you today. Sean is on assignment. I don't know what he's doing. We just say he's on assignment. Tricia McLaughlin here, Republican strategist, communications expert, all-around genius of Republican things, and Dan are both here to walk us through the day and to answer your questions. If you're watching on YouTube, congratulations, you found us. We're very happy about our ever-growing audience on YouTube. You can't ask questions on YouTube, but you can go in the chat. And if you do, resist the impulse to be negative and engage in personal attacks. Peace, love, and understanding. Write whatever you want in there as long as it's constructive and productive. If you're here on the two-way platform, we're delighted. Chance to ask questions. If you're never asked a question before, today is the day. Raise your electronic hand, and we'll get to you in just a moment. I will run through the day ahead. For those of you who are new, this program is modeled on what the TV networks do every morning. They have a call like this where they run through the day book, what's coming up, and then they kind of kick it around, and that's what we do here on the morning meeting. Again, Sean is off today. As you know, later today at 11 Eastern, I'll be with Karl Rove for 2 hours. Chance to listen to Karl talk about the Electoral College, go through all the battleground states, and then take your questions. And then tonight, our show all about Pennsylvania, 6 Eastern to 8 o'clock. Including a brand new poll of Pennsylvania and a focus in oversampling of Erie, Pennsylvania, which is obviously one of the key battleground parts of the state. All right. Today, the vice president, once again, late start. She's not doing anything till public, at least. 1:40, she departs Philadelphia. Someday, I hope to learn what the vice president does with all this downtime. I'm sure a lot of it's spent with meetings to help her win the election, but no public events until she arrives in Atlanta at 3:35, and then tonight at 7, she has a doozy of an event. But again, unless she adds something, no public events until 7 tonight in Atlanta. She has a campaign, delivers remarks at a campaign event in Clarkston in the Atlanta area. Here's who will be there besides the vice president: Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, Tyler Perry, Barack Obama, and Bruce Springsteen. Not sure what the program will look like, but tune in. That could be fun. All right, Donald Trump, Tempe, Arizona, 4 p.m. Eastern time with a rally. And then a Turning Point PAC and Turning Point Action hosts, quote, United for Change rally in Vegas. Stay up late, everybody, 10 o'clock Eastern time for that one. Then, I don't know if he's flying overnight or flying tomorrow, but he's in Michigan tomorrow. Might be flying tonight. Tim Walz in North Carolina, Greenville and Wilmington. J.D. Vance, a rally or delivers remarks in Waterford, Michigan at 5:30 Eastern. Doug Emhoff is doing campaign events in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Kenosha, joined by Wes Moore and Tony West, former Assistant U.S. Attorney General in the Obama administration, Kamala Harris's brother-in-law, and my college classmate. So just so you notice, we've talked a lot about how the Harris campaign is still tending to the black vote, particularly young black men. You'll notice the surrogates out today with the candidates and the spouse include Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, Tyler Perry, Barack Obama, Wes Moore, and Tony West. So they're obviously still trying to deal with the black vote. Okay, that's what's on the day book. So we're going to start with the town hall from last night. And I want to continue to say, every day I'm going to say it, I think, please get ready for your candidate to lose, no matter who you're supporting. This race is not Clinton-Dole 96. Dole had no chance to win at this point in the campaign, okay? I'm not even sure it's Romney-Obama, okay? It may be closer than that. Don't know for sure. There's no doubt that the private polling and some of the public polling continues to trend for Donald Trump. Haley Barbour, in politics, good gets better, bad gets worse. It's very hard to cover a campaign when one side's clearly doing better and not lean into everybody in Wilmington's an idiot, Trump's going to win. It's very hard. And it's particularly challenging when you've got things at cross purposes. On the one hand, half the country thinks Donald Trump's Satan, okay? They don't like to hear anything positive about the Trump campaign. On the other hand, it's not the media's job or honest analyst's job to pretend things that aren't happening. So don't go overboard. We're not going to go overboard here and say it's over, Trump's going to win. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today is not great for Kamala Harris. Again, it doesn't mean Trump's a great guy in the eyes of all of America. It doesn't mean Trump's going to win. But where we are right now is they're increasing problems to the Democratic Party. You saw it in the punditry from Democrats last night on CNN after the town hall. You saw it on morning television, where Democratic pundits trying to be poker faced are clearly feeling what a lot of Democratic donors are feeling and Democratic elected officials are feeling, which is there's no time left for her to get better. And I think the biggest story of the news cycle is, along with Trump loves Hitler, which we'll talk about, is her performance last night was the last straw for a lot of Democrats. No more, the more she does it, the better she'll get. Dan, talk about what you viewed about her performance last night, why it's considered in Democratic circles to be such a disaster.
Yeah, I think the good news was she drove her message. As you said, Trump, the Hitler remark, Trump is a fascist. That is in most headlines, in most opening paragraphs of the story. And for people who don't pay attention day in and day out and glance at the news, in that regard, it was mission accomplished. The challenge is, as we've talked about now going back to August, is, and you heard it in the questions that were asked to her last night, people who want to know more about her. And what you saw last night, time and again, was when she was asked a question, and I don't believe a single question was like totally out of the blue where, like, you know, anyone on this Zoom would be taken aback of like, ooh, that's a curveball. Her initial reaction often is a facial expression of almost surprise and discomfort. Then you can see the wheel spinning in her head. Kind of, how do I say something without saying anything, without offending, without kind of really answering the question? And then pivoting, as Joe Biden famously said about kind of Rudy Giuliani, a noun, a verb, and Trump is a fascist, right? And you could see the voters' kind of faces, and I think a lot of these people wanted to be for her, kind of like, I'm not feeling you, right? It's a cold kind of like a teacher talking to a pupil. And I think, you know, we saw this in 2019, and there was a hope that as she did more interviews and settled down and got more comfortable, that you would see kind of a human being with some passion, some humor, because we talk about it. Trump is having fun. Like, it is clear as day that he's feeling pretty good. So I think the frustrating part to Democrats is it is clear that she is just not really capable right now of answering that question, why should I be for you? And I hope that, you know, enough voters decide that she doesn't have to, but I don't feel confident about that.
Tricia, I want you to try to help solve a mystery that I get asked about every day, and you probably do too. Forget asking her, how would you deal with the China invading Taiwan? Or what kind of person would you appoint to the Fed? Or what would you do about agriculture policy? She's basically, from the very first interview and in the town hall, she's asked the same questions. Why didn't you stop the border down earlier? What's your view on fracking? How would you be different from Joe Biden? How do you feel about this issue of some of your past positions, including taxpayer-funded surgeries for illegal immigrants? These are the same questions over and over. And what people ask me all the time, and I'm asking you, how could the staff not have her have better answers to these questions? She's gotten 15 mulligans, and her answers, as Dan just characterized it, and as David Axelrod said word salad last night. How could it be that she's not prepared to answer these questions better? Oh, hold on.
Oh, my master plan worked.
Yeah.
Take her off.
Tricia, hold on, because we can't hear you.
Partially that she had doing a mock dinner.
Tricia, can you hear me?
Did it not work?
You've frozen, and we didn't hear anything you said.
How's it now? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
how's
go
it
ahead.
now?
You're still there. You go. You're back. Start over. Start like you said nothing. Please start over.
I'm back.
You're back, but we didn't hear a word. So go over. How could the staff is the staff not preparing her? Is she? No, didn't hear anything. But we hear you now. So take two. Go ahead. Sorry to ask you to do it again, but we didn't hear anything.
She's largely known to over prepare, is my understanding. I mean, there's that notorious donor dinner where she did some sort of a mock dinner. So I mean, when she's on her talking points, when she's able to put them in a basket, when she's able to talk about the narco like what she's done with narcotics, she's pretty good. But it's the problem is that it always seems like during the headlines, it always seems like this is a surprise question, kind of as Dan mentioned before. But I think part of the issue is she's unwilling or unable to create any daylight between her and Joe Biden. That's a big part of the problem, is that, anything as simple as the economy, I wish we would have taken inflation more seriously earlier. I wish we would have taken, gotten something done in legislation or with Congress on housing earlier. These are pretty easy, simple things that she could be navigating. And instead, it always seems like it's a real major surprise. And it seems like her closing argument is very much crystallizing in that Trump is a fascist, I'm not Trump, and that's why you should vote for me. Nothing about the economy, really little about immigration. It's kind of going back to the same old talking points, and it might be helping with the base, but I think the real problem with the last night, it was just more of the same. It's not going to move the needle, and people are starting to, really realize we're getting down to the wire.
Yeah. Look, she's a human being, and there's psychology here for sure. But if you're the staff, if you were hired as her consultant and you were really trying to help her going into that town hall, and you said, all right, you've answered the question of why didn't you do more on the border earlier, but we don't think those answers have been good enough. We think you need a better answer. Like, she doesn't have a better answer. So again, the question I get asked is the staff letting her down, or is she simply, because of psychology and limitations, simply not able to give better answers to drive a message?
I think it's been enough time. I think everyone could see, if this is the first 2 weeks of the campaign, I think JD Vance, I don't think he was strong the first 2 weeks, but then he kind of found his footing. And I think we figured she would by this point as well. But I think there actually are simple answers for the policies. Something like that 2021 border bill it was largely a messaging bill because it allowed almost every illegal immigrant to have some sort of pathway to citizenship. She could have spoken to that and said, I wish.
Oh, we lost Trisha again.
Would have in 2021 at the start, it would have given Republicans. So I don't know if I can blame the staff. It ultimately is the candidate. She should be doing her prep work.
Yeah, I mean, that staff, Stephanie Cutter, Brian Fallon, David Plouffe, I cannot believe that they, that they have not thought about this, that they're not seeing the same data that everyone else is seeing and getting the same earful from people. And not to, throw Harris totally under the bus, but the other challenge is her answers keep changing. Like, I actually thought her best answer on how are you different from Joe Biden came yesterday when she very calmly said, I'm going to focus on the fact that prices are too high. Like, that was the first time that I heard her give a crisp, succinct, and then she, boom. Now, we can argue over price gouging and like what her solutions are. But in the past, she's just like, I'm not Joe Biden, ha, 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 right? Like, I'm a Black woman, like, end of discussion. But it's just every day there's a different way that she's answering questions. And that is kind of not a good sign 10 days out.
Yeah. All right. Again, if you want to be involved in the conversation, we'll get you in just a bit. Please raise your hand. Next question is the tells. One thing I'm looking at is, are Democratic candidates going to campaign with her when she goes to the battleground states? That's always a big tell. I don't think Republicans are going to avoid Donald Trump. And that's a pretty big change from what might have been, right? You go back a year ago, you would have said it's possible that some Republicans would have scheduling conflicts when he came. But you see all these candidates now wanting to be with him, at least as far as we know so far. So what are other tells you're looking for to say things are going bad for her? Axelrod last night denigrating her in the town hall. I don't think he'd do that if he thought she was going to win. But what are other tells, Trish, that you look for to say, for any campaign, but particularly now for hers because they're on the back foot, what are things you look for to say they're acknowledging they have a problem?
I mean, I think the low-hanging fruit is the Bob Casey ad in Pennsylvania, him cozying up to Trump on NAFTA and saying he bucked Biden. You're seeing a little bit of that with Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin and some of her interviews talking about her work with Trump, and then as well Tester. But I think that the question as well for her kind of closing argument being that Trump is going to lead to the end of democracy, that, Trump is a fascist, that's really tough on the down ticket. So I do wonder if we're going to start to see some real separation. I would say come early next week, come the weekend, if these early voting numbers that we're seeing out of Nevada, out of North Carolina, out of Georgia continue, because these guys are going to want to save themselves.
Yeah. Dan, what are tells you look for?
Yeah, Tricia, I mean, there's three things. The first is unity. We've talked about the ads here that the Democrats are running to separate themselves. The second is message discipline across the party. And, now you're seeing stories in the niche DC, press like The Hill and other things that the DSCC and DCCC is advising candidates not to follow this like Trump is terrible message. Stick to bread and butter, stick to substance that's, unique to your district. So the party is going in different directions, whereas Republicans are all singing the same song sheet about price, inflation, the economy, immigration, chaos. The third thing is the lack of public complaining, right? If you go back to 2020, people were, Trump should wear a mask. Trump should be empathetic now that I had COVID, like I feel your pain. Trump should say that I'm going to listen to Fauci a little more. Like it was all the armchair generals giving him last minute advice to save the campaign. What do we see? And this is not just in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post, the New York Times, a story on a Saturday about Latinos, the story on a Sunday about Black men, the story about underperforming in early vote, the story about union problems throughout the Midwest. Winning campaigns don't face all of this criticism, all of this second guessing. And so, look, part of it is Democrats just do nervous really well. I mean, the old expression, we do the circular firing squad better than anybody else. But time is running out. Voting has started. And there is anxiety that, to your point, she's not down 10 points. She's not even the Mitt Romney kind of like 3 to 4 durable points that Obama had. But it is kind of maybe a durable 1 to 2 points. And you're running out of time to flip that script.
Yeah. So to some extent, if it is a durable 1 or 2, and that's, I think that's a way to characterize it, but it's a way to characterize it, then it's going to be, is it Trump's underrepresentation in the polling versus her turnout operation, right? Which way does it move? If the tug of war is like this, is it going to move this way, going to move that way? These campaigns are run by very sophisticated people, and they're not just sitting around passively. So she seems committed to this message through Tuesday for her speech on the Mall, right? On the Ellipse, it seems unlikely. Now, look, they've got a new abortion ad out. They're not like they're not messaging on anything else. But their main message from the candidate between now and then seems like it's going to be this. But they may switch on Tuesday if it's not working, right? They're not going to go for the final full week if the data suggests this isn't working. I don't know what they'd switch back to. Maybe back to the economy. But this question of, Jen O'Malley Dillon, David Plouffe, Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, they're not just sitting there passively saying, what's going to happen in the world today, right? They're trying to change things. So we had the Atlantic story. And then last night we had a story, and we're going to talk about it here, even though, interestingly, it's not anywhere that I've seen. It's not even in the New York Post. Guardian has a story about a woman connected to Jeffrey Epstein making an allegation about being assaulted by Donald Trump in Trump Tower. Okay? That story runs, and it gets no pickup. So my first question, Trish, is why wasn't that story picked up? Why isn't it in the New York Post? Why isn't it in the New York Times?
I mean, I think the veracity of it, if you're a responsible journalist, you want to savor your credibility, especially you're going to be on extra scrutiny when we're less than 2 weeks out from an election. So I think it's appropriate.
Just to be clear, I'm not asking like argumentatively or like how dare they not print it. I'm just wondering, particularly for the part of the press that doesn't like Donald Trump, here's a woman making an accusation against him connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Why would the press that wants to stop Trump? Are you saying their desire to stop Trump and their interest in good stories is overwhelmed by their sense of responsibility?
I don't know if it's by responsibility or knowing they'll be under such scrutiny by the right and hopefully by their colleagues as well, given how close we are. But I think, of course, it invites the question, like, what evidence is there? I didn't read the story itself. I just saw, this Twitter sphere, the X sphere talking about it. But I mean, I think there's also a question, why wasn't this brought, for the last 4 to 6 years? especially when the Epstein stuff was hot.
Yeah. Dan, I can't imagine that this story is not a turtle on a fence post. I can't imagine that it wasn't engineered, if not by the Harris campaign directly, by allies of the Harris campaign.
Yeah.
And they put it in the Guardian. So that's not the best place to get pickup. Do you think that means that the Washington Post passed on it?
Yes. I mean, you would first try to shop it around to the domestic press, even to some of the websites that, traffic in this stuff, and have high readership. Look, I mean, it's my understanding the allegation is from 20 some odd years ago or 30 years ago. You just dropped the John Kelly news. You're trying to get everybody to talk about Trump's conduct around fascism and leadership. And I just think there's only so much kind of gossip and outrage that you can gin up. And at least where the campaign wants to go, I mean, it's now clear that this was a game plan. They made their pivot last week. Now the kind of validators, so to speak, are stepping forward. I think, Mark, the one other, to change subjects for one sec, the one other area that she's going to go with messaging is abortion. She's going to give that speech in Texas. It is, look, I will say, and I believe this very much to be true, there may be a hidden vote with women on abortion. The one piece of good data in the early vote is that women are turning out. It is skewed more heavily female than male. That is relatively good news for Kamala Harris. And so I do think the two tracks are going to be abortion and let me scare the hell out of you about Donald Trump.
Right. Back to the issue of the Atlantic story and of Kelly to close out, and then we're going to take your questions. Politico Playbook today, the lead author is someone who's written very favorably about Vice President Harris. And he expressed skepticism, didn't say definitely not work, but he expressed skepticism that this closing argument would work. If you're the Harris campaign, you're on day 2-ish of driving this message. Tricia, would you be happy with how much coverage it's getting and the way it's getting covered? Or would you be discouraged?
I'd be happy, but is this this is one anecdote, he said. I think what would have been a smarter play by Harris is if she was flanked by, say, Esper, say John Kelly was actually there with her, or Alyssa Farah, former senior Trump administration officials, cabinet members who have now, expressed that would be the end of democracy. That more general narrative to me is a lot more compelling than this story about Trump praising Hitler, because Trump denies this. Others who have worked with him, even Esper, has said, I've never heard him say anything like that. So I don't think that this is necessarily going to land. We've really been told, since he came down the golden escalator, that he's a white supremacist, that he's akin to Hitler. So this isn't really anything surprising coming out of the Democrat camp. As well, his actions speak a lot differently as far as his support for Israel. Obviously, him having a lot of Jewish members of the cabinet, Kushner, Ross, Mnuchin. I mean, the list goes on. It's just, it doesn't seem that believable, whether it was said or not. I don't know. I don't know the context. But if I were the Harris camp, I would have had a broader narrative push, and including John Kelly in person, I think would have been way more combative.
My assumption is they refused to do it, right? And Kelly hasn't even endorsed.
Sure.
So, Dan, I looked at the battleground state newspapers and local newscasts. I didn't go to a Green Bay diner, but I did look at the national media loves the story for a day. But my experience, fingertip feel, is they don't think this is going to win it for her. That's my sense of just sophisticated read. But I think if you walked into a Green Bay diner today and you went table to table and said, how outraged are you by what General Kelly said? They would say, what's that now? Like, this is not Access Hollywood. This is not something that I think people are going to talk about. I may be wrong, but I key off of the battleground state newspapers and TV coverage. It's just not a story for them, or it's certainly not a lead story or a very big story. So I'll ask you what I asked Tricia. If you were the Harris campaign, would you say day 2 has gone great, let's keep going?
I think if you walked into a Green Bay diner, they would be aware of the allegation of General Kelly. They would be aware that Trump's kind of character and conduct is kind of back in the news. Do I think they read the New York Times or the Atlantic magazine? No, I do not. But if your goal is to get that chatter, I think they may have accomplished it. The second question, though, which is different, is it moving people? And
Yeah.
no, I don't.
Yeah.
And I think even the campaign's own data, I go back to, I forget, what is it, Future Forward, the huge Democratic super PAC, there is $700 million is being spent. They did not leak unintentionally that their research shows this does not work. What they said does work is exactly what Tricia said. When a Republican looks into the camera and says X, Y, and Z, people do listen. They do hear that. So I think, what I've heard is the Democratic playbook down the stretch is two things. One, try to get those soft Republicans, particularly women, who, kind of the Haley vote, who are uncomfortable with Trump, to come off the fence for Harris. I don't know if this message to them works. The other group that they're so focused on is young voters. And I really don't know if this message resonates with young voters. We're just going to have to see.
Yeah. All right. Celia, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Unmute yourself. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm trying to think. I was kind of trying to track my thoughts through that whole conversation, but I'm in Tennessee. First time Trump supporter. So first 2016 and 2020, excuse me, I just avoided the top of the ticket altogether. Didn't really feel like there was anyone that represented my views well. Can't really say that there is now either, but it feels like a cop-out 3 times in a row. So it's just, I think for me personally, it just has reached a point where there's so much insanity in kind of the other side that it just, I don't know, maybe I'm part of the protests for Trump vote, if that makes sense, where it feels like the only thing I can do is kind of give a big middle finger to everything else because it just feels kind of crazy. And I was just, I don't know, I was kind of thinking, because around here, so I'm from Iowa originally, lived here for 8 years, and around here, most of the people that I interact with, I'm in marketing and events, so I work with a lot of people just through the community, and most people, I would say, kind of fall in the independent, non-directly affiliated, but even, I mean, I have a friend that works for a large Democratic kind of campaign managing firm, and hearing her talk, there is no hope left. And she's working with candidates in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and that for her, they're just kind of trying to tie up knots before the end of the season, but they don't sense a lot of hope. And I'm talking to people that would traditionally been very, very liberal, that are either just stepping out altogether or are voting for Trump.
Yeah.
So
when you talk about the
Yeah,
Democratic Party, when you talk about the Democratic Party, is it they haven't dealt with inflation and the border? Is it cultural stuff? What is it that
I think it's kind of all of it. I come from more of the libertarian side. Like, I discovered you guys through the Fifth Column. So I'm a big Fifth Column fan. I kind of come from that side of thinking. So it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag of all of it, where the entire Democratic Party is moving away from my beliefs wholesale. I'm pretty fiscally conservative. I would like a lower tax rate. Overall, I would like just kind of a little bit more sense of sanity within our fiscal realm, which that doesn't really exist. But then also socially, I'm pretty liberal within reason. I mean, I'm pro-choice within reason to a point. Like, I'm not afraid to say I'm okay with a certain point that it's no longer a comfortable issue for me. And, I'm pretty pro-drug legalization, but it feels like when they've moved left in social directions, it feels like without a plan, without a purpose, without an end goal, it's like we just generally should do this thing. So therefore, we're going to blindly move in that direction. Hence drug legalization. We've seen in cities across this country where that has not been handled responsibly, and we're seeing second order effects because of it.
One more question from me, and then I'll let Tricia and then Dan go. I know you've talked about this as being kind of a protest, anti-democratic vote. What's Donald Trump talking about, if anything, that appeals to you?
Honestly, I I would like to say economically, I'm not the biggest fan of tariffs. I don't think I've been sold on tariff policy quite yet. But I would say economically, immigration wise, I mean, we're seeing effects of it in Tennessee. So the fact that this is no longer kind of that overused cliche term of like every state is now a border state, that is kind of what it feels like. So I would think border security is a big issue for me. At the end of the day, whoever is going to get us in a situation where there is less governmental involvement in my life at whatever level, I am happy with.
Yep.
And I think, especially through the COVID pandemic, obviously he holds and his administration holds some responsibility for our response to that. The only grace I can give them is that they were on the early end where we were still truly trying to gather some information. But I mean, it's gotten to the point where it feels like government is involved in every single aspect of my life. And whatever we can do to move away from that, I think as a generalized kind of feeling or lack of a better term, vibe, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Trisha, question for Celia. Maybe Trisha's frozen again.
Sorry,
Dan.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead, Trisha.
sorry about this, guys. Celia, we kind of talked about Donald Trump's character, or at least the thoughts on his character, the presentation of his character. Just things like Donald Trump being Hitler, these allegations that he praised Hitler, does that cut through to people, your friends, your colleagues?
Celia, go ahead and answer. Just
It's okay. I was gonna say, I think I understood what she was saying. Has it cut through to friends, colleagues,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah.
Political.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think so. The people it's cut through, the messaging gets to directly, if that makes sense. That's within their world. That's within their bubble. That's kind of within the circles that they travel in. Other than that, I mean, I hate to say it, but it feels so infantilizing. That the American public were treated like we can't have adult discussions on topics and issues, and that we can't, oh no, we can't get there with that conversation because first we have to deal with the fact that we have literally Hitler. And sorry, my dog. But no, I don't think it has cut through. And at this point, it's a joke. It's just a meme. It's I don't know. Yeah.
Dan, question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for sharing everything that you did. Is there on any level, has Harris resonated with you? Is there any issue? You mentioned you were pro-choice. Is there anything where she's like connecting with you at all to give you a second thought?
I'm trying to think because I truly, and up until very recently, I've yet to go put in my vote, but I plan to early vote before the 31st. But I tried to keep my mind as open as I could for as long as I could. But I think, I mean, I don't mean to sound like everyone else and a lot of people that have spoken, but I don't think I can answer that fairly because if you held a gun to my head, I don't think I could tell you what she believes, like what her positions are. She's kind of tried to expound upon that, but really, and I listened to you guys on Megyn Kelly and you guys kind of discussed that, where it's just this kind of loop of nothing, the world of word salad. And no, I don't think, because even the pro-choice position, her absolute refusal to admit that there's any point that we could actually have a reasonable conversation about, hey, maybe with exceptions, maybe this is a point that we could say you can no longer elect to abort. That's not within the realm of conversation that she seems willing to have.
Yeah.
So I personally don't think that she is anything that for me, really.
Yeah. So we're so grateful to you for coming on and talking through that. Incredibly interesting to us, and make sure you tell all your friends to watch, please.
We absolutely will.
Okay.
Thank you guys
Thank
so much.
you.
I appreciate all that you do. This is a fantastic program.
We're really,
Thank
really
you.
grateful to you for sharing all that. I think I speak for many when I say I just learned a ton. Yadira, thank you for joining. Welcome in.
Hi, I'm. Oh, sorry.
No,
Sorry to
that's
interrupt.
all right. That's all right. Just tell everybody where you are, who you're supporting for president, and what's on your mind, please.
I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm supporting Trump once again. And I'm also just kind of nervous because Kamala's coming here tomorrow. And so I'm here. Well, is there more going on? I'm more worried about Ted Cruz's spot. Is that really at play? So if you guys have any insight on that, that would be great to know. Is, my beloved Ted Cruz going to be gone?
I'll go first. I think he'll probably win, but I think it'll be super close. And I'd say he's probably got about a 25% chance to lose would be my guess, but he'll probably win. Trisha, what do you think?
My read is the same, but this does, I think, raise red flags for the future. I think gubernatorial coming up, the next Senate race in 28, I think that Republicans need to really work on their ground game there and not sleep on Texas, because I think it could be where the puck's going for Democrats.
Dan.
You are one of the few voters I've ever heard refer to Ted Cruz as my beloved Ted Cruz.
I listen to his podcast daily.
Okay, all right. I think 2 weeks ago, Democrats were looking at trend lines and thinking, oh my goodness, could this kind of be the year? But it does appear it's stalled at kind of a 2 to 3 point, deficit. And in a state like Texas, it is so hard as a Democrat to break through that last mile. We saw it with Beto O'Rourke. We've just seen where they've gotten so close. So maybe not this year, but we've been saying this for 30 years, perhaps next election cycle.
Yadira, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming in. All right, Nancy, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind, please.
I'm in the liberal bastion, the Upper West Side of New York City. And I don't have the thickest hair, but I won't have any left because I'm pulling it out. I don't think I live in a bubble. I grew up middle class. My parents didn't make much money. I've done okay for myself, but I'm going to pivot just a little bit because when you said Trump is having fun, this is what I don't understand. At whose expense? I cannot bear the thought of, first of all, why can't he pronounce her name correctly? You think it's a joke? I don't think it's a joke. It's very easy to say Kamala. And when I see commercials about poisoning the blood, about immigrants who clean toilets and pick lettuce, and we wouldn't have vegetables without immigrants. But here's the one I want to focus on. I'm a gay woman. I have a son. I have a wife. I work hard. We love our son. Do you know, in 2011, we got married in New York State, and our son asked us why we weren't married. And we told him because we weren't allowed to get married. And he burst out in tears. He started to cry because he didn't understand our families just like any other family. So now I'm going to ask you about transgender, okay? Because I'm seeing these horrific, and I mean horrific. You say Trump is having fun campaigning. He is talking about transgender people. I know a few transgender people. They struggle mightily. There's nothing funny about making fun. Maybe people out there don't remember Matthew Shepard 30 years ago strung up because he was a gay man, or Jodie Foster and all these people having to be in the closet. So yeah, I'm angry because, you don't go to school a man, a boy, and come back a woman. What kind of cruelty is that? Why is that tolerated? What has happened to our country? And one last thing, and then I'm sorry, I just have to get it out.
Now speak.
What do people want from Kamala? I know, ask me, I'll tell you where she stands. I always wonder this. If we had flipped the end of 2016 and Joe Biden had inherited Obama's economy, boy, I think there'd be a whole different conversation here. I think that Biden really came in at a time, it was the end of COVID, and he inherited an economy that was just about to be awful. And I think Kamala Harris, I just think we're not involved enough to nominate a woman. to elect a woman. I really do believe that. I look at all the countries. I think of all of the leaders around the world who are women, and I just think America is not really that evolved. I'm sorry I'm
Nancy,
rambling, but I'm
yeah,
angry.
no,
I'm really
yeah,
angry.
no, Nancy, we're
speak
very
for
glad.
millions.
We're glad we're here, and as Dan says, you speak for millions.
How,
I wanna
and as a gay woman,
Yeah.
this is what I want to say. I believe that if Trump is elected, there's a good chance that in my opinion, horrific criminals, Alito, and Clarence Thomas with his ginormous bus worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that was gifted to him, will resign and will get a Supreme Court that will overturn same-sex marriage. It will go back to the states, just the way abortion did, just the way abortion went back to the states. And you know what happened when abortion went back to, nobody wanted abortion to go back to the states. Women are suffering abortion. And I'd like to say to the previous person on, it's not about when you have an abortion, it's women's health. I knew a woman who had cancer, okay? She had cancer in the 6 months of her pregnancy, and she needed to have an abortion. Do you realize if she lived in Louisiana today, what would happen? What would
Nancy,
happen to her?
Nancy, very grateful.
Okay, I'll stop.
No. I want to say one thing, then I want to ask you a question, okay?
Go.
Those of you in the chat who are mocking Nancy, I'm going to ask you again. In a couple weeks, your candidate might win and hers might lose. And she, as Dan said, represents tens of millions of Americans. You should aspire to live in a country where you have not just the presumption of grace towards Nancy, but you understand why she feels so strongly about these things. I've spent 10 years trying to convince people in Nancy's position to try to understand why Donald Trump has support. And Nancy, I would ask you to do that because he might win, and you should understand why, and not just say blame it on Justice Alito. Just hold on.
Can I say one last thing? Because I'm a New Yorker. One last thing.
Sure.
Guess where I grew up. I'm going to give you a hint. It sounds like it begins with a Q and ends with an S.
Queens.
I grew up in Queens, New York, about 3 miles from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'm 68 years old. I just want to say one thing to all the people, like scrolling right now. We knew back then when Trump was redlining and keeping Black people out of rentals, what that family was about. It's just, okay, I'll stop.
Okay. All right, Nancy, I'm going to ask you one question, then Tricia is, and then Dan.
Okay.
Okay. You said you can explain where she stands on a position. So I'm going to ask you about something. I'm going to ask you something, and she hasn't answered it, and it's a little bit sensitive. So I'm going to try to phrase it as carefully and well as I can.
Nothing will offend me at this point.
No, I know. I'm not worried about offending you. I'm worried about, inciting a riot here. She previously supported taxpayer-funded trans operations for illegal immigrants. Is that something that you think is right for the government to pay for?
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So did Donald Trump. It was part of the Trump platform. But Nancy,
no, listen to me. Today, whatever pervaded under his administration, today he would say he opposes that. He would forthrightly say, I'm not for that. Now, you may say that's hypocritical because the law when he was president would have allowed it, but he would say he's for it. Is she for it? Or he'd say he's against it. Is she for that or not?
I don't know, and I don't care, and I'm going to tell you why. Because, you see, these are the little tricks that they play. If there are 3 a year, okay, I don't care.
But Nancy, here's why it's not a trick. Here's why it's not a trick, okay? The Trump campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars on ads on this topic.
That's correct.
And it's not something that tens of millions of Americans support. And she won't say where she stands on it. And you said you could say you could answer where she stood on anything, and you can't say where she stands on this.
Okay, all right. Let's give you that one. I can't say where she stands on that.
Yeah,
but that is a grain of sand in a beach of issues.
It depends on how big you make the beach. But for the American people, taxpayer money to pay for any health care for illegal immigrants, for a lot of Americans, that alone is offensive.
All right, I don't agree.
I know you don't agree. I know you don't.
I don't support it.
You don't support what? You don't support
taxpayer money for transgender surgery.
You don't. And it took you a while to say it. But you know who still hasn't said where she stands? Kamala Harris.
But that given the overwhelming number of issues would not even be close to being a deal breaker. And I also think
It turns out to be for a lot of people. Hold on.
I know, and that's
Hold on.
the thing
Nancy,
that's so sad.
I say this not genuinely. I love listening to you talk, but we got to get other people on. But I want to give Trish and Dan an opportunity. Trish, do you want to ask Nancy a question?
Yes, and Mark stole mine, so I have another one though, Nancy. Is there anything, any policy, anything that you like about Donald Trump?
Nothing. And I mean, what could I possibly like? You know,
What about criminal justice reform? Did you think that was positive?
I thought that was positive, but it's overshadowed for me by everything else. Yeah, okay, but he's such a, you know what? Do you know who Don Rickles is? Don Rickles is a comedian who would make fun of people. You know, if I want, Trump's having fun now. I don't want my politicians to be mocking and making fun of other people. I'll go to a comedy show for that. I don't want people going, come, mama, 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 mama. That to me is not funny. What's funny is dancing for 39 minutes. I think he's sundowning personally, but yes, I support that. But in the scheme of things, I think he is a clear and present danger to this country. And I think J.D. Vance is worse. What
Okay,
about catless ladies? He thinks that
Nancy,
people who don't have children are less worthy.
Okay, Dan, do you have a question for your neighbor?
Nancy, I feel you. I hear you. You are my family. You are so many people that I know. You're passionate. I know people who have started crying over what they think could be on the horizon. There are not many things in politics that make my stomach nervous. The idea of gay rights being overturned makes my stomach nervous.
Yeah, it's horrifying. My family. It's my family.
Right. Now, look, I hear you. And it's one of the reasons I'm a Democrat. I was raised by two very progressive parents who always believed in helping the less fortunate and equal rights for everyone. Right.
Bless you.
I hear you. Two things I'll just say. One, why does Trump mock her name? It is a belittling. You're from Queens. Who's the macho? Who's tougher on the block? He's done this for 9 years. But the second part I would say, and Mark made this point, so Mark, I'm going to steal it, but I'm going to credit to you for saying it yesterday. One of the things that frustrates Democrats about Kamala Harris and has frustrated independents is if you believe in something like transgender rights, and I think most Americans support a person's right to be who they want to be. It's a private matter. When the government then steps forward and says, we're going to start kind of paying for activities, I think it crosses a line. But regardless of how you or I feel about that, if Kamala Harris believes in it, say it. People will respect you if they disagree with you because it speaks to your soul. What do you believe? What animates you? And it's not just transgender rights. But on so many issues, she won't really answer questions.
Name one more.
Let's talk about civil rights. She just says, like, of course I'm for it. Because it's like the insinuation is her skin color. Right? What will you do on taxes? She doesn't want to get into answers because, and this has always been a character issue.
Nancy, I'll give you one, Nancy. Reparations for the descendants of slaves. Where is she on that? She says she wants to study it, but where is she really on it?
I don't know, but I would suspect that she is not pro-reparation. That would be my guess. Well, that's it. Wait, that's if she's Black today or Indian. And you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, but the problem, Nancy, I mean, the thing is, yeah, look, love Trump or hate Trump, there is not a lot of ambiguity about where he stands.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I disagree with that, Dan. There's tons of ambiguity. There's tons of ambiguity. Where does he stand on Social Security? Where does he stand on the deficit? Where does he stand on NATO? I mean, well, NATO probably more specific.
Is he a Democrat?
Where's he stand on Putin?
Is he a Republican? Yeah. I don't even know what party he's affiliated with.
Yeah.
All right. Nancy,
Sorry,
couldn't
I'm
be more-
sorry. I
No,
had to
no,
get
no,
it
no.
out. I'm gonna
No,
go
no,
play
no.
pickleball after
Nancy,
this.
we couldn't be more grateful for you to join, for
Nancy,
you
you
joining.
literally speak for
And-
47.5% of this
Yeah,
country. It's not
baby!
4.75, it's
And Nancy,
47.5.
all I'd ask is, I'm not predicting Trump will win. I'm not rooting for him to win. I
Life
just
will
ask
go
you,
on.
but just prepare. Exactly. Just prepare
And
because he might
respect
win. He
people.
might win.
Well,
I
you know
want you to be
what?
prepared.
I'm well enough off that I don't have to leave the country. And I'm proud of the accomplishments I've made. And I hope
Yeah.
everyone, gets through this.
Okay. Nancy, thank you. Really grateful to you for joining. Nancy's a friend of mine, and I was told she might be coming, and I couldn't have been happier that she did. Ethan, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Please unmute, tell folks where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for having all of us participate. I'm very grateful for being involved in peace, love, and understanding. I'm a California Democrat. Casted my vote for Joe Stein, so not Democrat for the first time. And the question about how Alan Lichtman's viewed in your world. Do you pay no attention, or posters always want to make things sound very close. Close, I thought that Biden had a real chance of winning after that historic debate performance. Would your panel bow down or pay more respect to his 13 keys if he ends up making that prediction?
Oh,
And number two, given that the polls are all pointing the other way right now, would you attribute it to polling errors? And number two, are we now second guessing, coalescing around Harris?
okay.
So we can have a candidate.
When are you home this evening?
Noah, you need to mute.
Yeah, so we
All right, I'll look into it. I'll email her, ask her if she has availability for a Zoom ASAP.
Noah,
But
Noah.
please,
Ah,
but that goes against its key.
Huh.
So that's
all right. Ethan, thank you. I'm having, in addition to the open mic, I'm having huge audio issues. So I'm
Yeah.
going to ask Dan. Dan, were you able to hear all that?
I think you asked about Alan Lichtman, Ethan. I'm sorry. I too didn't, from the moment you talked, I'm not even sure who you said you're voting for. It was not audible.
All right, Ethan, I hate to do this, but start over if you would. Just
All right.
first of all, who are you voting for?
I cast my vote for Joe Stein.
For who?
Jill
So-
Stein.
Jill Stein.
Jill
Okay.
Stein,
And just
okay.
briefly ask your question because we are having audio
Yeah.
issues.
So I'm wondering how Alan Lichtman's 13 keys is viewed in your world.
Yeah.
Given that now the polls are all indicating the other direction.
Okay, Ethan, thank you. Ethan, I'm gonna mute you just because we're having trouble with your mic. So my view of Alan Lichtman is I'm not a big fan of it. I can't dispute his record of success, but I find it a little bit static and like a lot of modeling by people like that, it doesn't involve like the flesh and blood of real life and human beings. So I'm not saying it can't be right, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Tricia, what do you think?
Mark is more the expert on this. I would kick it to him or Dan, but I will say I think less than polling at this point. Early voting can be a red herring, but that's something I'm reliably looking at more than the polls right now.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I just think those things are based on publicly available data, and it's a rear view looking action that fills the algorithm. And politics is not static like that. And there's so much information that the campaigns have access to that the public does not, that I just think they're fun. I read them too. I can't look away, but I would not put too much in them.
All right, Ethan, thank you. Thank you for joining, and sorry about the audio issues. Alex, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, who you're supporting after you unmute. One more time, Alex. Unmute if you would. There you go.
Hello. I'm not supporting anyone because I'm not a US citizen.
Yeah. Okay.
But I am enjoying the two-way platform.
Yeah. Where are you
I am
calling
the father
from?
from London. Sorry, yeah, it's a sunny afternoon here.
That's right.
I am
you
the father
you
of two
deserve an
Americans.
occasional day of sun.
That's true. The sun shines here more often than people realize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am the father of two Americans, so I do have a personal interest in this. So I wanted to draw a comparison between Harris and Keir Starmer, who we have over here. Both lawyers who have obviously had massively successful careers. but when they come under some scrutiny in the questioning, seem to have real trouble in thinking on their feet. And to echo something Dan was talking about, Starmer's also really had problems kind of explaining what he really stands for, which I think Harris has had as well. And there seems to be a bit of a pattern with the Democratic Party and with Labour. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think what my question was now. Yeah, I think why did Harris seem so timid in kind of explaining what it is that she wants to do, really? I think if Trump's taught us anything, it's that it's not a problem to offend people who are never going to vote for you.
Yep.
And taking a position on something can actually be a massive benefit. To you.
Yeah, Alex, I'll go first. I think, and I've said this before, her biggest weakness, her Achilles heel, is she doesn't like to make decisive choices under pressure. And unfortunately, making decisive choices under pressure is sort of the job description of running for president and being president. And so I think if you look at the people in the White House, including President Biden, who were extremely skeptical of her, and part of why Joe Biden didn't want to step aside or thought it was a bad idea to step aside was because he thought she might become the nominee and was skeptical of her chances of winning, is for that trait. And she's exhibited that trait throughout her career. She has lots of strengths, but that one, not wanting to make decisive choices under pressure, I think is what's implicated when she's asked questions in public, because she doesn't want to say something that will get people mad at her, or that will cause an interest group to protest, or that will create some challenge to her credibility. And I think that just freezes her up. Dan.
I think you said it very well. And that strategy was successful for her as she rose through California. And that's part of the problem, right? It's what knocked her out in 20. She is a better political athlete today than she was a few years ago. But when there's pressure, this has been her MO, to really get defensive. And I think what you do see is the one place she isn't in her head is talking about Trump. And that is when she leans forward and you can feel the passion. The problem is that's just not, I think, where enough voters are. They want to know more about her, and here we are 10 days out.
It just seems like that hasn't worked. That hasn't worked in the past, has it? Kind of focusing, for that to be your strategy in the last couple of weeks to try and remind everyone that Trump's a bad person.
Yeah.
It feels like if you're ready to take that message, you would have probably taken it by now.
Yeah, Alex, thank you. Appreciate you joining. I want to close with two of our favorite participants. Not both of whom asked to be brought in, but I'm doing it anyway. Floria, who's a Trump supporter, and Chris, who's a Harris supporter. I'd love you two to do a joint benediction to close us out. What you thought of today's program and how you'd recommend the country stay united through Election Day and beyond. Floria, you first.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. As always, Mark, thank you for this platform. And Dan, thank you for being a part of this platform. You do an excellent job. I just want to say going forward that I hope that the Democrat Party has a come to Jesus moment and rethink what their tactics are that is so divisive. This whole thing of, well, what about the Republicans? What about the Republicans? The Democrat, so many people, myself included, have ran away from the Democratic Party because of what they do. I'm hoping after all of this that we can respect one another's choice in America to vote for who we want to vote for, irregardless of what you believe is right or wrong. We're supposed to be in America, and we're supposed to have the right to have the ability to vote for who we want to vote for. I don't understand why it is that especially Black people feel they can degrade other Black people, because they don't do it to any other group that veers away from the Democratic Party. Why is it so okay to degrade and talk down to other Black people who simply are exercising their right as an American citizen to explore the options of voting for everyone else? I just hope that when Trump leaves, that this is not the Democratic Party's modus operandus going forward, because I find them to be very divisive. I'm just hoping and praying that we could just be more respectful and understanding that we all have the right to vote for who we want to vote for, irregardless of what other people think.
Gloria, I appreciate that. I want to just ask you one question. When you were listening to your fellow Gotham City resident, Nancy, talk about how anguished she was about what's Donald Trump, how did you feel about that?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I felt so bad for her. And I feel that unfortunately, it's the Democrat Party that is stoking fear and anxiety in their own supporters. Why can't the message be, listen, if Donald Trump gets reelected, he was the president before. We'll get through this. It's only for 4 years. We'll get through this and we'll rebrand and we'll bring the country back. Why does it have to be, well, we're all going to be in chains again, or we're all going to jump off the George Washington Bridge. We're all going to pull our hair out. We're all going to set ourselves on fire. Why does it have to be so inflammatory? The question begs, why is the Democrat Party using their own supporters as fodder, as pawns? Why can't you talk your group off the cliff instead of pushing them toward the cliff? I don't understand that. And like I said, I only just recently changed my party affiliation months ago because I was so disgusted with the tactics and behavior. And honestly, I don't see it stopping because Trump is going to be out of office. I don't see it stopping. Okay. The way they went about just installing candidates, telling us this is the person you're going to vote for, and the media, it's all just overwhelming. It's just, I said, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't.
Okay, Gloria, thank you. Chris, final words from you, please.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that for most of you white people on this phone call, who I know are just doing, you're celebrating that you just heard a Black woman say what she said. Just remember, 85% of Black people in America are going to reject Trump again. Just remember that. She is the minority, and she knows she's the minority. Black people don't just criticize Black people. We criticize white people too, who by a majority support a person who talks about grabbing women by the parts, who the Justice Department, Nixon's own Justice Department, sued his company in Trump's lifetime for racially discriminating against Black people. We're not talking about some stuff that happened back in slavery days. I have no use for that. But Trump also puts people on the Supreme Court who strike down affirmative action, which is the only reason, frankly, that people of my generation, when they got out of college, could get jobs at big companies, because up until the 1970s, a lot of white companies didn't hire Black people, and a lot of law firms wouldn't hire women as lawyers. They told them they had to be paralegals. So we need to remember the history and which side different groups have affiliated with. And I'll give all the Trump supporters, once again, just 2 reasons to really question why you still support him, despite the policies that you like. He watched people talk about lynching his own vice president. We saw elected representatives cowering behind locked doors in the Capitol, and your commander-in-chief sat and watched and smiled. And the company I grew up in when I was 6 years old, and we used to go to first grade and pledge allegiance to the flag, that wasn't the kind of president I think we thought we had in this country. But you are about to give us another one That's all I have to say.
All right, Chris, are you home? Are you going to the Harris event today?
I am probably not going to the Harris events. I don't like huge crowds.
Yeah. All right, you're missing a Bruce Springsteen concert. All right, Chris and Floria, thank you both. Oh, sorry, I muted you there, Chris. I apologize. All right, thank you both for coming in. That was not exactly the benediction I was looking for, to be honest, but it happens. Tricia, thank you for filling in for Sean. Please come back regularly, and I'm going to send a tech to your house to get you better internet.
Yeah.
Are you in Ohio or are you
Sorry,
in New York?
guys.
Are you in Ohio?
New
or
York.
New York. All right. It's a Gotham City issue. Dan, thank you. Sean will be back tomorrow.
Yes.
I'll see everybody in 1 hour, less than an hour, with Karl Rove. 2 hours, Chalk Talk, Electoral College. We'll go through all 7 states. We'll play with the Electoral College map. It'll be on YouTube. You can watch it. But if you want to ask after the fact, but if you want to watch it live, please join me in an hour. And then tonight at 6 o'clock, 2-hour episode of Two-Way Tonight, all about Pennsylvania. We'll have lots of great guests and our new poll of both Pennsylvania and of Erie. So thank you, Tricia. Again, thank you, Dan. Thanks for everybody who asked questions. I'll see you at 11 Eastern with Karl Rove.